Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our October-November PhD Symposium here at UCU. Tonight, we are privileged to have at least 4 presenters here with us. We are looking beyond the literary world, and so we shall be having a paper on effective use of ICTs in conservation, agriculture knowledge pathways among smallholder farmers. We shall also have a paper presentation on portrayal of religious syncretism. And another paper will be an interpretation of the interpreters. I'll let you know which the 4th and the 5th papers will be. The presenters will be coming in very soon. But first, let us have a word of prayer from the rock, Peter Aringo.
Let's bow our heads and pray. Lord, we thank you for convening us here this morning. Many coming from far may not even have made it, but you made it so. We ask you to lead us in this discussion. Give us your wisdom. It's not ours, it's yours. The brains we use are yours. Lord, farm them up so that we can have good presentations, good discussion. This we ask you through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Let us begin with ice-breaking through introductions. Please introduce yourself, who you are, and what you'll be presenting to us before we go to the first presentation, beginning with our elder.
I'm Joseph Award from the School of Research and Postgraduate Studies. It gives me pleasure to be here every time there's a presentation, because we're trying to develop our PhD program, and these are one of the ways we can develop and promote PhD research through presentation in the symposium. Thank you for the organization.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Mulumbi, a master's student of literature. I'm happy for the invitation by Dr. Gulede, and I'm also privileged to attend this PhD symposium because it gives me a deep understanding, because that's where I'm heading. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mary Ward, PhD candidate. I'm going to present to hear my voice more.
I'm Peter Ringo Vizmana from Kabale University, and a PhD student of UCU here. And I'm glad to be here so that you critique what I will present and farm me to be confident. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Achora Janet. I'm coming from Makerere University, Department of Innovations.
So welcome all of you to this presentation today. As usual, we shall give each of you an hour to make your presentation and to respond to the discussions. Let us begin straight away with Miss Mary Naula Owol. I'm your usual coordinator, Dr. Cornelius Wambi Gulede. Thank you. Welcome. Make sure you speak loudly and clearly for everybody to hear you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Mary Ward, but my papers have Mary Naula. So I'm glad to have the 4th presentation today. And it's a very fertile topic that has disturbed majority of us, especially in Africa. My topic today is the portrayal of religious syncretism in Akiki Nyabongo's novel, Africa, answers back. Department of Languages and Literature, PhD, Symposium. My introduction, the paper investigates religious syncretism in Akiki Nyabongo's Africa Answers Back. Nyabongo has shown that religious syncretism is an African phenomenon that is here to stay, as Africans have not yet completely embraced Christianity. I think from the introduction we can all flash back in our communities, in our churches, and confirm with me that religious syncretism is still an issue in African Christian life. Problem statement. In the novel African Answers Back, Nyabongo depicts African traditional religions as being deeply rooted in the African ethos of faith and evident in several rituals where elements of both African traditional religions and Christianities are prevalent. Purpose of this paper. The purpose of this paper is to analyze the depiction of religious syncretism in Ugandan novel in the context of rites of passage, pregnancy, birth, naming, marriage, and death, as we shall unfold later. Literature review. To Adamu, African Christianity is hypocritical because many African Christians still trust in African traditional religions, most especially in times of emergencies. As we shall look at Kaka, in my major paper, Kaka, presented by Okuruti, she had five girls, and she desired to have the sixth child to be a boy. And being a Christian, she has been praying, first child, second child. When she reached the fifth child, she decided, I need to consult our traditional African religions. And indeed, she went, and she got the baby boy. And immediately after that, she returns back to her Christianity. And so, to Korut, she presents to us that actually there is a religious syncretism that is in African traditional religion. According to Leonard, the life of an African man is interwoven with religion because they eat, drink, and sing religiously. Whatever an African man is doing is connected to religion. Whether he is going to walk and meets a rat, he will connect that to a god, to something, either good or bad. Or if he's drinking or he's eating and something shocks him, he will connect that to either something good or bad coming his way. In the same vein, Izenya argues that in Africa, life is religion and religion is life. This means that religion and African lifestyle cannot be separated because everything they do, whether they are sleeping and dream about their dead mother or father, they will come and sacrifice something because they associate their dreams with their traditional religion. So that is what Mia is saying. To continue the literature review, a study in South Africa by Dennis found out that conflict between African traditional religion and Christianity is still common. This is in South Africa, but it's the same in Uganda, that African traditional religion is still common, even in our lives, in our churches, in our communities. Yes, we are Christians, but we still believe in African traditional religions. Methodology. The design is qualitative, descriptive study of one main Ugandan novel, Africa Answers Back. The method used is qualitative content analysis. Theoretical framework. I have used the post-colonial theory based on the main aspects of colonialism and its aspect on the colonized, which have persisted even after the colonial rule. We know that Christianity came to Uganda many years back, but we still have we are struggling with Christianity, and we are in the life of hybridity. Because, yes, we are Christians, but we are also trusting in African traditional religion. So we are in a state of hybridity in that theory, post-colonial theory. This theory has helped me to explain the themes as depicted in Akiki Nyabongo, Akiki Nyabongo's novel, Findings. This book, Akiki Nyabongo's book, Africa Answers Back, is a very nice story. It starts with war, a religious war. There are the Catholics fighting the Anglicans. But in this particular one, Akiki Nyabongo, as a chief and as a supporter of Anglicans, they were fighting with the Catholics. And indeed, he won the battle. So from the beginning of the book, there is already a conflict, religious wars between the Catholics and the Anglicans. So that's how the book starts. You know, and so when he went into this war, he was there for some time, but as he was returning home, there his people at home, as being a chief, Shifati, they realized that actually he had changed. He had a bit of their African traditional religions and also had a bit of the Christianity. And so as he returns, we are going to hear what he says. Okay, finding. This study, I have investigated the depiction of religious syncretism in a Ugandan novel in the context of rites of passage, pregnancy, birth, naming, marriage, and death, as it will unfold itself. So when in pregnancy and birth, they will move hand in hand. So here, Nyabongo comes back from the war, and Nyabongo has married 375 wives. So when he was in the war, he meets with Reverend Herbert, and the Reverend Herbert condemns polygamy. But to Chief Ati, polygamy is normal. It's part of African life. And so he was also questioning Reverend Herbert. How do you live with only one wife? How? Because you are poor. You work with only a book and a pen. But for us, we have cows. We are rich, so we should have many wives. However, as he reaches home, this question that Reverend Herbert asks him affects him. And so as he reaches home, one of the wife, he left that wife when she was pregnant. And so when she reaches home, he had so many questions to ask. So this is the beginning of his question and changes that we are going to see. So one of the senior wife, you know, all the women came out to see him. And they discussed and talked, and he was very acquisitive. And he asked, where is Aboki? And Aboki was pregnant. And according to that, their tradition, he, as a king and as a man, is not supposed to see the woman who is pregnant, and especially when she's about to begin the labor pain, and when she's in the labor pain. And so Chief Ati insists that he wants to see his wife, Akiki, Aboki. And so the elder wife has to remind him and hear what she says. When she refused the husband to see, so he reports to the pregnant woman. He had come to see you. He's talking to Aboki. But of course, I couldn't let him in. You understand all of that? I don't have to explain to you. So Aboki answered, why did he come to see me? Does he want me to suffer? Or does he want the child to die? He learned bad habits during the war. So this is the religious syncretism that Nyabongo portrays or depicts Chief Ati as a man who had gone into the war of the religion, and as he returns home, he has religious syncretism. He thinks he should see his wife, but according to their traditional religion, he's not supposed to see the wife during the labor pain, as we shall see later. So, when the child is born, of course, he didn't go to see him. He was not allowed. So, here is the naming of the child. When it came to the naming of the child, he decides as a chief that he wants to name the child. But the community is not in agreement with him. So what is he telling the community? So after telling the community that I am going to name the child myself, they were not in agreement. So here what he's saying, the community asks, are you losing your head? Asking to name your child yourself. So to the community is a shock, because in this community, the father of the child has no right to name the child, but the community should name the child, especially the aunt, the elder aunt of the child should name the child. But to Shifati, he wants to name the child by himself. So here, what he says, Shifati cleared his throat. Instead of answering, he cleared his throat and he continued. Since Stanley was a great man, he's talking about the Christian man. He's a first missionary who came to Uganda, and so he is telling them why he's going to name the child. He says, since Stanley was a great man, the boy shall be named after him. His family name will be Mujungu. After these people that roam. To him, yes, the missionaries are people that just roam. They just move around. So he presents this to his people. But these people, they are not happy at all with him. So, but he also is aware. So he tells them, yes, I am naming him Stanley after the missionary who came and is a good man, but I know what it is. So he continued to narrate to them the story. It is our custom to give the child 3 names. The first name is selected from the 12 praise names. He's very alert, he knows, but he's trapped between the two. Should I give completely Christian name? Should I give half-half? So the second name comes from God's action. The third name from God's will. I shall permit my sister to pronounce the name of the child. Of course, he had time with the sister and the community. And of course, even if they refused him, he insisted, and he is allowing the sister to name the child. I want to hear what the sister is saying. So as the sister gets up, what does she say? You must remember, my people, so this is a sister talking, that we have selected only one name, praise name. The other names are chosen by the child's father. But this is not the culture. The culture, the child's name should be taken or given by the aunt or the community. But to Shifati, he has chosen the name by himself. The elder sister spoke in a trembling voice. Why is her voice trembling? You know, it's not welcome. But anyway, let me try to give the child a name. My people, the child's praise name shall be Abala. That is what we call the community name or the clan name. We all have the clan names that we are still struggling with. I am Naula. She is Achora. There's a worry. We all have different names. Dr. Wambi. So those family names, we carry them. So there is a religious syncretism. Why are we not having that Christian name? If I am called Mary Jane, that should be my name. But we still have that praise name with us. So there it brings a religious syncretism, but we still have even in the church up to today. The sister continues, we are all familiar with that praise name. But the Father has brought new names to us. He's warning the community. Because the name of the child is given in the community as a group. The name should be given to the child, and they have to agree. The first name of this child shall be Stanley. And of course, you know what comes. When she pounced the name Stanley, a few women cried out, our customs, our customs. And the second name shall be Mujungu. Again, the women cried out, our customs, our customs, our customs is gone. The drum sounded softly, showing sadness at the change of the custom. So we can look at this, that women in the community, they're custodians of the culture. They know more about culture than men. So these women, as they are hearing, they are bringing names sternly. They are aware that there is something that is not right with the Shifati. Why bring this name Stanley and this name Mujungu? And it is going to affect our custom. So they are crying and they're drumming softly. It is an indication that there is change. There is a mixing of something that has come into their culture that they are not happy with. But Shifati, after naming the child, the praise name and the Christian name, he plans to name the child in the church. That even us today here, that's what we normally do. In Ugandan community or in African community, when the child is born, we normally give the child the first name, the Christian, the family name. If you are called Owor, you will be called Owor. And then the Christian name waits, and what is called baptism. Of course, baptism is one of the new words that came with the missionary. For us, it's naming the child, which is done by the community. But the Christian naming is baptism. So Shifati, after fulfilling the need of the family, of baptizing or naming the child. So he moves on to the second naming of the child, which is named baptism, which is called baptism. So he tells the mother of the child that I need to baptize my child now. I'm going to take my child to Reverend Herbert and he's baptized. And so hear what the mother says. He does not need to be baptized twice. One baptism is enough. And remember at the back, the previous slide, that the women cried, our custom is gone. And Nyabongo is bringing a new way of naming the child called baptism. But the mother of the child is not in agreement because it is an indication that their custom is actually gone. So Shifati goes ahead and approached Reverend Herbert, and hear what he tells Reverend Herbert. I want him to be baptized into your Christian religion. He's aware that Christian religion is different from African traditional religion. I wish to name him after your friend Stanley. Of course, I have named him already. Of course, this is, to us all, it's not a new thing. We first name our children according to some tribes in the East. When they're going to name the child, they will throw two hands up, and then the one that comes down has rejected the name. And the one that stays in the roof of the grass thatch, that is a name that will be given to the child. And so, of course, that is the African traditional religion of naming. So they will name that, and then after that, we have named our child in a traditional way, African traditional religion. So after that, then we go to the church, bringing out religious syncretism. And exactly this is what Shifati is doing. He says, I have renamed him in our own way, but I want you to do it again in your way. Now his name is Stanley, and his family name is Mujungu. So, to Shifati, he fulfills the religious syncretism that I am not sure whether our reverends of the priests, I am glad we have Reverend Gulere in the house, whether he's aware that we first do religious syncretism, then we take the children to the church. He will tell us later. Marriage. Shifati himself got married to 375 wives. But when he was marrying the 175 wives, he completely had African traditional way of marriage. He didn't go into syncretism. However, his son, Mujungu. Remember that Mujungu is a son that is born and is taken for baptism, although Reverend Herbert couldn't allow. He called him polygamist, whose child should not be baptized. And he advised him to send away all the 374 wives. Then the child will be baptized. So Muzungu grows up, and after going through the school, the Christianity is baptized. And so there's a pandemic that came into the community, and this community suffered a lot. People died, including Shifati, as we shall see later. So we are looking at Mujungu's marriage, because his has the element of religious syncretism. Mujungu began to worry whether all his innovation has been for the best. Mujungu, after the death of his father, what he does, he becomes the heir immediately. And so as the heir, he's supposed to inherit all the 375 wives. But remember, he has gone through the Christian school of Reverend Herbert, and he has a bit of Christianity, has a bit of African tradition. So first he thought, I think I can be a Christian. As all of us, in most cases, we try to be perfect Christian, but you find yourself going back to the African traditional religion. And exactly this is what happened to Mujungu. So he got rid of all the wives but one, in a hope that his example will be followed by the rest of his subjects. As we can look at some of our priests, some try, and some of the Christians try, that maybe my children will follow my footsteps. If I have only one wife, so the same, my son or my daughter will plan and also be the first wife and remain there. But with so many criticism and having people who are around you, we end up compromising or bring out the religious syncretism by allowing, if my father had 4 wives, I can have 2. If he had 6, I can have just 3. At least I'm not so polygamous like my father. And exactly this is what Muzungu is doing. He still believes in the value of the reforms, but perhaps it was best to slow them down. The first thing he planned was to get few more wives, 3 or 4 at least. Not 375 wives. But of course, this is polygamist already. But he's trying to make it better by having at least 3 or 4. But at the end, he's still practicing the same thing, religious syncretism. Of course, as a community, they condemned him. And the wives were crying and wondering, you are the heir to the chief. How can you send out all these wives? And then the elders were shocked. They shook their heads, and they're wondering, what is wrong with this heir? Does he know our custom? And so he had to compromise and get more wives. Then he might have some peace to carry out his plans. Okay, death and burial of Shifati. Shifati, as I said earlier, had 375 wives. And when the epidemic came, smallpox, majority of the community died, and including him. But in African traditional religion, when an elder, a great man like a king, dies, there are so many rituals that has to accompany this death and burial. The king or the chief cannot be buried locally. It cannot be in a simple way. There are rituals that has to be taken on the body, to the wives, in the grave. Even as they are carrying him, they don't just carry him locally. But for Shifati, this couldn't happen because of the smallpox. But we can't also say absolutely not at all, because Mujungu, who is the heir, he has a half of Christianity and a half of the African traditional religions. But let's see what happened. The doctor came at once to the chief, that is Mujungu, and realized that he was dying. Shifati was dying. He told Mujungu that it was better that all the wives, except 2, should go from the house. One by one, they left weeping silently. They couldn't cry loud, like they would have rolled down, they would have sung, they would have worshipped, and so on, or touched their body. They had to go out. as a king and a chief, he is not supposed to have died in the hand of foreigners. Yeah, because the doctors Mujungu called were the doctors from Germany who came to treat the smallpox, and to the community, it's foreigners. And so whatever is supposed to be done in the body, the foreigners cannot do it. And it is normally done by men. So there was one foreigner man and the 2 wives, which to this community, that was not good. Soon after they had left the house, the doctor pronounced the death. The next morning, Mujungu told his people that his father has passed away. And you know, in African tradition, death is not there. Even the ancestors are still living, those generations. That is why they just say he's dead. No, he just passed away. He's not dead. This Ifati is actually alive to African traditional religions. He's alive and he's moving, he's watching and seeing what is happening in the community, whether his son is doing the right thing or not. So Chifati, as he leaves the throne to his son, this is now Mujungu. He selected a few of those who had had pox to bury him in his own graveyard. This is not allowed according to African tradition, religion, because as a chief, there are specific people that should carry him and take him to the graveyard. But here they picked local to take the body to the grave. The burial was simple. All the usual ceremonies were omitted on account of the epidemics. Conclusion. I conclude that Africans will continue practicing both traditional and Christian beliefs because the former is deeply entrenched in the religious ethos. Africans appreciate that certain elements of their traditional beliefs need to be discarded because they are no longer useful. But they are trapped between the familiar and the foreign, leading to religious syncretism, and also leading to hybridity of having African traditional religion and having the Christianity. Up to today, Africans still practice African traditional religions alongside Christianity, implying Christianity still has a long way to completely transform African society. Because African society, of course, has been here for so long. But why are we still to and fro? We are in the church, we are also in the African traditional religion, and so we are having religious syncretism. Recommendations. I recommend negotiations between African traditional religion and Christianity over what each of them can learn from the other, as each has something to offer. The African traditional religion treats evil or sin more punitively than Christianity do. We all know that African traditional religion, when you sin, immediately you die. And so there is a threat, there is a fear that if I annoy my ancestors, if I annoy my grandies, there is a God that can strike me dead, or my child can die, or my wife can die. So that is why there is that fear that I need to go back a little bit, otherwise I am going to be punished. Recommendation to continue. Christianity teaches that sin will be punished on the judgment day. We know that the Christianity is looking at the day when we are going to face judgment. That's when you either go to hell or you go to heaven. But for the African traditional religion, the judgment is at the spot. You do it and you die there and there. Christianity should learn to treat sin with the contempt it deserves. Sin should be punished on the spot to reduce the current rampant theft, abuse of office or public office, as well as immorality. I think this is, the people who are in corrupt offices today, they have names like Peter, John, James. They are ever, you go to office and find them. And it's Sunday you'll find them. Then they'll come to the office and do a very good corruption. They will steal money, they will embezzle money, they will have ghost workers. But they have those names, Peter, John, Joseph, and they are not sure where they will be judged on that day. Since the majority of African Christian men practice polygamy in both secret and public, they need to be talked to one by one. We know there's a practice that, you know, I am a Christian today, and so I don't want the other church members to know that I have another wife. So I do it in secret. And so I have a concubine somewhere, or somewhere I have children. Until a man dies, the African tradition community will not know how many children a man has. Because when he dies, that is when children will be brought. Many women will come and claim, this is his son, this is his daughter. And so it is either public, there are those who really introduce, and he has two wives, but there are those who seal it until he dies. Then he leaves the community to decide. Yes, polygamy, widely practiced in African traditional religion, should be abolished as it reduces a woman to a property. Those are the references. Thank you for listening.
Okay, that is Mary Naula with her very interesting paper on religious syncretism in Akiki Nyabongo's Africa Answers Back. We are now the Africans who are going to answer back. The others who are not in this room will answer back in their own way. And so, with this very good presentation, I hope you can take down some notes. You have given us a very clear explanation of what goes on in the story, how what you have conceived as syncretism happens, but what is syncretism? We need to be taught very clearly what you understand by syncretism, and what is Christianity, and what is African traditional religion. It is important for us right from the start to know what these are, because we may not know. It is actually confusing. It is the main task of your paper to let us see the boundaries between Christianity, African traditional religion, and maybe religion itself, to understand what is religion. How does Akiki Nyabongo portray religion from the African perspective and from the other perspective, which is the Christian perspective? How do the rites of passage, which you ably explain, how do the rites of passage from conception, or even before conception, what is the first stage? Is it marriage, or is it naming? We need to see through these stages so that we are sure that when the Christian gets involved in the marriage between a man and his 365 wives, what do they call that? Polygamy. And when the African does the same, what do they call it? That is acceptable. And the child that comes out of that union, how is the Christian going to treat that child when it comes to naming? And how does the African, rooted in African tradition, consider and look at it, as you have rightly explained? But still we need to have the process very clearly marked out. And in so doing, it is possible to ask the question, what is syncretic about the tradition in Africa and the tradition in the church? You know that the church also has a tradition. It depends on where that tradition is coming from. Is it coming from Rome? Is it coming from Canterbury? Is it coming from Alexandria? Where is it coming from? So that tradition is greatly upheld, and it affects all the processes within the rites. Similarly, you go down right up to death and burial, which I find very, very interesting. Another interesting point that you raise is the example from Mary Karuru Okurutu, that before they could get, this lady could get a child, they had to consult, and then they got the boy, so they went and presented the boy to the Christian God. How does that closely relate with the subject that Nyabongo is presenting? More so, your recommendations that there should be a discussion between the Christians and traditionalists on how to handle this. Is the discussion still necessary, in your view? Has the discussion taken place, or hasn't it taken place? How am I able to be Cornelius Wambi Gulere Reverend if the discussion has not taken place? And also we need to bear in mind that this story is of 1936. About 36 years from the time when the agreement, the 1900 Uganda agreement had been signed, and how many years before or after the coming of Christianity into Uganda? From which year did Christianity come to Uganda? 1877. So how many years are those? And so we need to know that time lag and how much it had impacted, on the Nyabongo's people. And then the big question there we need to ask ourselves in this paper is, how come with all those many years, the king still had so many concubines, just like we had in the biblical times? Which king had so many concubines?
Solomon.
Solomon, far less than what King Nyabongo had. And yet, what is the relationship between Solomon and God? Other issues that we also need to look at is, and that was the point I'm raising about contextualizing. We need to contextualize Christianity, we need to contextualize African traditional religion, and we need to contextualize this conception about syncretism. I like the way you bring in all those quotations from the text, which give us exactly what these characters are saying and what they are doing and what they think about this particular subject. And also, most significantly, the role of the women, the role of the mothers, because they seem to be the subject of contention. It is the wives that are many, and therefore when the husband dies, they have to be sent away. They are the mothers who must not be seen when they are pregnant, or else they suffer during childbirth. They are the ones, especially the auntie, who gives the name, and so they must stand firm and make sure that they give the right name to continue the custom. And also, it is indeed the women who are featuring most in this whole confusion. When eventually the religions decide to say that they are going to change certain things, we are not going to marry more than one, you need to tell us, would that affect the women or would it not? And if it does, would it be good for the Africans to continue practicing their traditional ways of marriage, or would it not be good? And if it were good and the church ruled that it shouldn't be, what would be the future of the hybrid church? Because the church, as you rightly said, has people who are stepping one leg in one realm and another leg in the other, just because certain points have not been agreed upon. Mujungu, and I wonder whether that is a name from the natives, but it is a concept of the white people, that this is a white person's child, or in praise of the white man. So we are having a praise name, which is not even praising the Africans, it is praising the Bazungu, the white people. How about the names of the king? Have you tried to find out what their meanings are? Because when we are looking at naming, we need also to go deep into the culture of naming. What do these names mean? Like today, you know that people are giving names which are with Christian sentiments, but they are in the local languages. Do we still regard that as an aspect of syncretism, or these are completely new names? Like now Mujungu is not English, it's not African, but it is in African language. So what do you have to say about that? Again, you present two theories. You're talking about, but that one we have discussed. Or only that I would need you to not get tired about presenting what it is that close reading requires. What is it? What are you doing in this, what you call close reading? Keep telling us. This is a different paper. It's not the paper you presented last time. I'll come up to say something about your conclusions after I've heard from the members of the House. And I wonder whether you would like to respond now, or we give others also to ask their, or make their remarks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary, for that very wonderful presentation. It's my first time to attend a literature symposium, but nevertheless, as scholars, I think I can make some comments. In your literature review, in the links between religion and Christianity, is there a recent literature that still follows the same narrative that you can include in that paper? And then my second observation was when you were explaining about naming, it was more prominent than the other rites of passage. Is it that the religious syncretism is more prominent in the naming custom or rites? And then in the death and burial of the chief, which was not done according to the tradition, what was the implication of this for the African religion or for Christianity? And then, is it possible to link your paper to a society so that when you're making the recommendations, it is contextualized? Thank you.
Thank you. Janet?
Thank you very much, doctors. Mary, for the presentation. Like I've already said, it gives me pleasure to attend such presentations because I learn a lot. However, my point was to understand more, but Dr. Gulele tried to air it out, the different words that were presented, like syncretism, Christianity, religion, and the like, because I may not have gone into reading about it, I would have loved to get the clear meaning before I get the detail of your paper. That is what I heard majorly, but was said by Dr. Gulere. Maybe I will come in later also.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Mary. Mine is a comment, really, because you kept on you kept on discussing the antagonism, actually, between Christianity, African traditional religion. What I draw out is this constant spite. You know, Christianity having spite for African cultural ways of doing things, and also Africans do that. And this word sin, I find it a real idealism of European way of thinking, because you see, to me, for Africans, a sin is tangible. Someone who commits something and you can see it. And the Christians have this idealistic way of thinking of sin. The moment you don't want my Christianity, you've sinned. I haven't committed anything. I've just refused something, and you idealistically term me a sinful person, sinful. This is why I find that, for instance, polygamy is something in African ways of behaving and so on. And I think it was there originally to prevent what we call now modern prostitution. Now, eventually, when the Christianity could not stem that prostitution, it has become too rampant, even in Western countries, and even in our African countries. So I should imagine that really for us, polygamy was a very, very important institution. It binds us to our women if you wanted to have them and so on. And don't go hunting for this, that kind of thing. But because the idea of Christianity has come in, hypocrisy creeps in. I will be a Christian, but since I am not allowed to have, my polygamy, I will find another way of doing it. So I imagine that really Christianity has taught us more hypocrisy than we had ever had. And probably I wish we could go back to what we used to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's hear Mary respond to this, then I'll give you my final questions.
Thank you very much for the contribution. I'm very grateful. Dr. Gulere has given me a lot. I'll begin by defining those terms. It's here, I couldn't present all of them, but in the write-up, it is there. I'll begin by religion. What is religion? Religion is a worship or believing in the supernatural being. African traditional religion, we have a God. And one of the authors in Nigeria brought out clearly that African traditional religion has no author. There's no author. But African traditional religions is written in all of our eyes, in our minds, in our foreheads. As we walk godly. As we sing godly. So because it is written in all of our system, we grow up and we know that before I eat, I get some piece of food, give it to the God. So it has no author, but it is there. We believe in it, and it is active. You can actually die. And especially in Nigeria, one of the Adamu says that in Nigeria, if you come and steal, the God sees you. For them, you can park your car anywhere. If the fuel gets finished, you can leave the car on the road. And no one will dare to come and take even tires. Because their gods are seeing, and that is supernatural power. What will do? You will end up dying there at the tires of that car. So for them, Nigerians, that African traditional religions, which has no author even, it is working. It's very active. It's very, very active. And so that is a religion according to African tradition. So as I say, religion is believing in a worshipping or believing in supernatural power or being. For the Christianity, of course, we have a higher God. The Bible says that he's a supernatural God. We don't see him, but he's seeing us. Even as we are here, he's here. The same with African tradition. That is, when as we are here, we are here. And actually, recently we were having a discussion, we are going to pray. And then one of our daughters said that, you know what? Do you know that your gods, African traditional God, can actually allocate you by that name in Naula? And even when you're in Kampala, it will come and hit you properly. Because you are connected to that name, Naula, which is coming from very far, where I come from there in Bugwere Budaka. So it will hit you because it can identify with your name. So even when you're in Kampala, that God, that supernatural God that Africans worship has connection. So that is what religion is all about. And then syncretism is believing in a half. You are not fully believing in African traditional religions, and you are not fully believing in Christianity, which is a missionary belief that was brought to Africans. Especially this one, we are looking at the Christianity in Ugandan context. So when we look at this syncretism, and get the definition, that is a half of me. I am not fully Christian, and I'm not fully religious, African tradition religious man, but I have a bit of my African tradition, and I have a bit of the Christian. So I'm here. I'm not a Christian fully, and I'm not African traditional fully. So it brings that element of religious syncretism. I would believe that if Christianity was strong enough, then Africans would have just packed their luggage and go to Christianity. And as Ms. Mana said that, you know, the African tradition was good enough. We look at men. I know I have married the first wife. I'm going to marry the second wife, and the whole community celebrates with me. We go for introduction. I go for the third one, and I'm allowed. But now that Christianity calls these African traditional beliefs or polygamy as it's sin. How do you have two wives? And so the Africans are wondering, I cannot have just one wife. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce Janet, official wife, and is here. So official wife is here, but I will also have my concubine somewhere. Maybe it is fulfilling the story of King Solomon in the Bible. By the way, doctor, you asked, what is the connection between this story and King Solomon? Actually, this Mujungu, when he was attending the school, he read the story. When Reverend Herbert condemned the polygamy to Chief Ati, Mujungu, as a Christian, read the Bible and came home and read the Bible, especially the story of King Solomon. And King Chief Ati and the wives wondered, this white man, Reverend Herbert, and the whole missionary group, they are not saying the truth. Because King Solomon had 700 wives plus 300 concubines, makes it to 1,000 wives. And for Shipati, he said, I have only 375, not even a half of what King Solomon in the Bible had. So this Reverend Herbert is a real liar. So actually he had to go to meet Reverend Herbert to tell him that, tell me, is everything in the Bible true? Reverend Herbert said, yes. Really, everything in the Bible, is it true? Reverend Herbert said, yes. He said, are you serious? Everything is it true? He said, yes. And so he told his son, read it for him, King Solomon. So he read. And Reverend Herbert, of course, he was very, very annoyed and actually banned the reading of the Bible by the students in the school because he told them, you don't need to read the Bible because you don't know how to interpret the Bible. But that is going to be my next topic of interpretation of the Bible. Yes. So I started from last. Religion, syncretism, hybridity. Hybridity is standing two ways. I am here and I'm here. I'm not fully Christian, I'm not fully Christian. So I am in between. That is the theory I'm using it's post-colonial theory, but that one is brought by Home Baba, hybridity. So it comes out well in all the characters, the main characters and so on. So the women, I think I've answered Paul. Paul, have I answered you all? Yes, Janet asked about the new literature. Yes, I have them in the main text. They are 2000, I think I don't have 2018. Yes, but the religion is something very big, it still is there. And in my work, the write-up I have. And then you talked about, can't I connect this presentation to a particular society? Of course, I gave example. This research is done in African context. I mean, in Ugandan context. So I'm using Ugandan society to give example. For example, I gave example of the East, where they throw the two hands up, and one that comes down shouldn't take the name. So it is the culture, the society in Uganda. And of course, in this case, there was no introduction. I would have given the elaborate society. In Uganda, we have societies that are a little bit more somewhere and little somewhere. Like if you come to Japadola's, the introduction is simple. It's not even there. Just bring your cow and that is all. But when you come to Uganda, the introduction is well elaborated, is fully marriage, that kind of thing. So I think in this context, if I fix myself in one society, it might not be so well, but as the Ugandan community is wide enough, I can bring from the east, from the central, and the north, like that. Janet, what is the other question? Death?
Maybe on that point, we need to be clear that we are doing close reading of Nyabongo's Africa Fights Back. So we need to have that context very clear. We know that in 1936, when Nyabongo wrote, he was writing about this particular culture, this particular community, and this community does these things that way. And then we can extrapolate to the rest of the communities. We are not looking at the other communities first before we look at the primary community. Yeah. And that is something Akiki that was omitted.
Yeah. And actually that community of Nyabongo it reflects the West. It reflects the West. It's a Toro community. So, but I link it to other communities in Uganda. But close reading, a doctor said, it is the community of the West in Uganda. The Batoro in particular, yes. Yes, I went in deep. There's more references in the birth than in the burial. Of course, even in traditional, we know when the wife is expecting a child, African man is very excited and is very happy. I read a research done in Kenya, and this research, it was indicating that the only time that the women have authority over men is only one time, when the woman is in labor suit. He can say, Peter, bring a razor, and he will run. He will run quickly. Bring saucepan, and he will run very fast. Bring for me this, and he will run. Bring this, and he will run. So it is only during the birth that the men, the African men, are obedient to the women, and they can be ordered anyhow. Even if they tell them go and bring a goat, they will bring immediately. But in all others, burial, whatever, and that is why I want to believe there is a lot of work in the naming than in the death and in the marriage, because the naming, I concur with that research. That actually, that's the only time when you're in a labor suit, you can order the man and you do anything. and they will keep them. When you go to the hospital, the research was in the hospital, that they saw men are being commanded, walking, running, and back and forth, and that is the only time. So to African tradition men, birth is very, very important. We receive birth as a new member joining the community, and we're excited. What kind of man or woman is that child going to be? And it is an addition to the community. Now, if you're already addition, you're already there, and you are just marrying. You know, marriage is, yeah, it's there, it's celebrated, but birth is celebrated more than other rites of passage. But in other community, it can be the reverse. Yes, so, okay, I think I'm through with Janet. Hybridity features in the church, I think I've explained that. The name, of course, according to the Mujungu and Shifati in particular, when he's naming Mujungu, according to them, there is a praise name, and then there is a name that is a family name, then there is a name of God's action. There are three: praise name, family name, and God's action. Remember that they know that African traditional religion is serious. When we are naming the child, it must be connected to that God, to the ancestors, okay? So, to Shifati, he decided to take away the name, Bala, that is what? The family name. And the praise name, he calls Mujungu, and he names him Stanley. So he omits others. But African traditional man or woman believes in the meaning of the name. By the time they name me Naula, I have a to maybe something that God has done, or to my grandfathers, or to what they have seen, or according to season. Our names are differently named. I'll bring an example of still Okuruti in Switch. When the child, the mother of the child brought the child to be baptized by the priest, and the priest named the child, name the child. And so she gave the praise name, the action of God's name, and the priest said, no, I want a Christian name. Said, what is a Christian name? I want you to name my child in the praise name, and then the family name. So they had a dialogue, and the priest insisted. So the lady went out and brought a very long name to the priest, which the priest himself failed to pronounce. And immediately she remembered, said, what is that? He said, what is that name? What is that name? And the priest could not explain. She grabbed her child and said, no, don't name the child that name. Me, I want the name that is connected to our traditions. My child should be named after the seasons of harvesting, praising the Lord for giving us a lot of food. So it's a funny story in that book, to Okuruti, one of the characters there. So Africans, they just don't throw the names. No, the name has so many meanings. And actually the priest, the mother to the child asked him, what is the meaning of that, Stephen? What is the meaning? And he couldn't explain. He said, I even don't know the meaning. He said, give me my child. I'm not going to baptize that name. So in Uganda, when the kings are named, they are royal names. Yeah? By the time I called the Nabagereka, it's already connected to the royal family. There are specific names of different categories of people and with different meaning. That as they call you, there's something they're also what? Communicating. And Okurut brought it so well. Yes, the society. Dr. Gulero also asked that, don't you think if we go back to accept or the negotiation between the Christianity and then the African tradition, will it affect this polygamy or not? I want to believe that it can bring unity. Instead of us doing things secretly, I have married officially today. I have a very good example of our friend. He wedded his young girl from Makerere. They were all Makerere on this Saturday, for example, like this Saturday. The wedding was so powerful. We all enjoyed. My daughter was one of the maids. And then the following Saturday, he introduced one of the ministers. It was in the newspaper. And that was like, what? You wedded on Saturday? And he went and introduced the whole MP and left this small girl. Is already stuck in the house, but the husband has introduced an MP. So what do we learn from this? That actually there is pretense, hypocritical kind of life that we are living. But if African Christianity, African religious leaders and the Christians meet together, maybe we shall get a fertile ground of agreement that how do we do this? Instead of you stealing in private, instead of doing this and of course we can't even come to say that I did this, but of course it is known. So I think negotiation can work. I'm not sure whether some negotiation has already taken place. The other thing, in one of my writers, I think always so, say that, when the Christianity came to Africa, they named African traditional religion as barbaric, evil. Yeah? So evil, and it caused the Africans to, you call our religion evil? We have been eating, walking, sleeping, doing everything religious. Now you are calling it evil. So what are we going to do? To do it secretly, it is evil, but still we shall trust in. And you, as which is good faith, believe, we shall do it in public. I have brought my child to be baptized, but I've already baptized my child to the gods, and very well is accepted. And so this religious hypocritical, it can go if the Christianity came to Uganda and embraced the African traditional way of life and allow them to explain what is this God you are believing in. Of course, some of African traditional religions is not good, as I said, that we have elements of killing, bloodshed, that kind of thing. But to them, that blood, when it is shed, is actually life. So Dr. Glenn asked, with so many years, what is it that from 1877 up to now, the purpose why, the reason why Christianity has not penetrated deep into African tradition is, as they came, what happened? They immediately look at African traditional religions as evil. It is superstition. And so they couldn't look at any element. Is there some elements that is good that we are able to bring it out and allow it to be practiced? But the moment it is named evil, the Africans decided to hid. But up to now, African traditional religion is being practiced because of the way Christianity entered their way of life. Solomon have explained. What is the other one? The discussion, as I said, I'm not sure whether it was there. Maybe I need to do some research. Yes, I talked about Kaka. Of course, Kaka brings out the real element of who African woman is. First, as Doctor said, that women carry the custodians, and women are featuring a lot in this presentation. We are looking at Kaka as a typical African woman, that today I am saved, I praise the Lord, but when I see my husband is not happy with me, I have only boys, so I go back to my root, to the African tradition. I get the child and come back. And this is what is happening actually among the women. They are the custodians of the community. They know what the men want. They know what the society. Because in African tradition, to be childless, it is already bad enough. Even to have one sex like this, like myself, you have only girls, oh, that is a curse. You need to come and I give you some herbs. And actually it works. It worked for Kaka. And so she gets the child. And what happens? She goes to church and presents the child and said, praise the Lord, the God, which God we don't know. The Lord we worship here in the Christian church has given me the child. But she's lying, of course. So, yes. The syncretism in the church, of course, who is a church? Who is a church? We are the church, okay? The Africans are the people in the church, and we are the one making a congregation in the church. We are the same people who go out and practice African tradition. So the syncretism in the church, it is us. We are the ones taking it there. And we are the ones coming out with it, go back to African tradition religion, and then come back to church. So what is church? Church is us. And African tradition religion is also us. So we are really practicing religious syncretism because we are one. I'm the church. And I also belong to African tradition religion. Doctor, I don't know how many have not answered. Oh, how do you pass on the concept of polygamy? I think I explained that. The child treatment. I think I also explained that. How does African treat? Yes. These days, I think if I am polygamous, those days, I think when I was young, if this Mr. Peter is polygamous, the child was not baptized, not at all. But with the time now, I can see children being baptized because I think they have considered that the African child, the child is innocent, okay? So what is happening is we accept the child, but the father can think about the mother. Father and the mother, they are not allowed fully in the church, whether it's even the women, by the way, they are polygamous. You can decide to go and whatever we're doing. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Naula, for that very, very interesting exposition. What I'll give you to go with, food for thought, is about your recommendation that there should be on-spot punishment. I was wondering whether you are baiting mob injustice for sin. But of course, we have got an example from Christ himself when he said, "Let him who has never sinned throw the first stone." And what happened? The woman who had been brought because he had been caught red-handed couldn't be stoned because everybody else had sinned. And so even Christ forgave her and told her not to sin again. Don't you think that this is the kind of attitude that Christianity seems or ought to promote rather than the holier than thou? When we look at the Old Testament, Christ, whom the Christians follow, says he came to fulfill the letter. But there are some actions that are not part of the letter. And the letter is in the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, and other pronouncements by the prophets. So we cannot expect the actions of men to be the actions of God. God allows things to happen. From your discussion, the supernatural being is the same supernatural being, but seen from different perspectives. And so you need to make in your discussion very, very clear what actually entails syncretism, or if syncretism actually exists. It is a conception under post-coloniality which has implications. Who is calling it syncretism? Do we also have Christians syncretics, or it is only the Africans who are syncretic? Those are some of the points that you need to look at, especially when you look at this not dead, passed away. That is the African perspective. Isn't it the same even in the Christian perspective? Does it matter whether the Christian is European or African, that they would actually believe that somebody has not died, but they have just slept or passed on? Bring into perspective also the Ebola epidemic, where when a person dies of Ebola today or even in the past, they are treated the way they treated this smallpox dead, I think it is good for us to use that kind of literature. If at all we need some updated literature. I agree with the Cox here that most of the literature we had was 2006, 2004, so we must use some examples of today and get Nyabongo to the current status. So thank you very, very much for your discussion. I'm very sure that this paper is going to inform a lot of people, and also to prove that literature is not literature for its own sake, but for money's sake. Thank you very much.